In exactly 47 seconds, at negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit alpha, King Kyle Stormbringer would find a woman with no heartbeat buried in the Alaskan snow. She would have 14 combat scars carved into her flesh, zero memories locked in her mind. And when his wolf howled the name carved in ancient prophecy Seraphine, he would know three possible truths. She was his fated mate. She was a trained killer. And someone had tried to execute her. The war was just beginning. The blizzard wasn't just a storm, it was a living thing. A creature of ice and fury that clawed at the northern border of the Frost Peak Pack territory with teeth made of frozen wind. The kind of cold that didn't just bite, it devoured. It stripped flesh from bone if you stood still too long. It turned breath to ice crystals before they left your lungs. AlphaKing Stormbringer felt none of it. His massive form cut through the whiteout like a blade through silk. 6'4" of solid muscle wrapped in a fur-lined tactical coat that had seen more storms than most men saw winters. His boots custom made for a man who walked the razor edge between civilization and the wild, crunched through snowdrifts that would have swallowed a lesser wolf whole. Behind him, Colonel Draven Iron Wolf kept pace. Barely. Draven was a warrior. 35 years of combat had carved his face into something that looked like it belonged on a cliffside. Scarred, weathered, unbreakable. He was Kyle's beta, his second in command, his brother in everything but blood. And right now, even he was struggling. Kyle, Draven's voice was half snatched by the gale, distorted into something almost inhuman. The wards are just ahead. They're holding. Whatever breached them is long gone. Kyle didn't answer. His eyes, the color of winter steel, cold and sharp enough to cut, scanned the endless white expanse. Most alphas relied on sight. Kyle relied on something deeper, something primal. His wolf, Thor. The ancient name meant thunder in the old tongue, and Thor was restless tonight. Not the usual patrol alertness. This was different. This was a clawing, scraping energy that raked at the inside of Kyle's skull like fingernails on stone. Something was wrong. Something was here. "We're not going to the wards," Kyle said. His voice was gravel and smoke, authority wrapped in barely controlled violence. Draven stopped mid-step. "What?" "We're going down." Kyle turned sharply, his massive frame pivoting with the precision of a man who'd spent 3 decades making life or death decisions in split seconds. He plunged down a steep incline, sliding through powder toward a cluster of jagged black rocks that jutted from the snow like broken teeth. "Kyle, there's nothing down there," Draven shouted, scrambling after him. "It's a dead zone. No shelter, no." The wind shifted, just for a second, just long enough, and beneath the overwhelming assault of pine and frozen earth and animal musk, Kyle caught something else. Blood and jasmine. His wolf exploded. Not a thought, not a feeling. A detonation of pure instinct that sent Kyle's human consciousness reeling backward. Thor surged forward, shoving against the barriers that kept man and beast separate, howling with a desperation Kyle had never felt in 30 years of life. "Impossible," Kyle breathed. Jasmine was a flower of summer, delicate, warm, a scent that belonged in gardens and greenhouses, not in this frozen graveyard where even the trees grew twisted and angry. But it was there, real, undeniable. Kyle's legs moved before his mind caught up. He covered the remaining distance in 3 long strides, his boots finding purchase on ice-slicked stone with the confidence of a predator born to this landscape. And then he saw it. At first it was just color against the white, a splash of darkness. Ink spilled across a blank page. Hair, long, black, fanned out like a raven's wing across the snow. Then a hand, pale, blue-tinged, fingers curled inward as if trying to grip something that had already slipped away. Then the body, a woman, half buried in a drift that had tried and nearly succeeded in becoming her grave. Kyle dropped to his knees so hard the ice cracked beneath him. She was dressed in rags, not clothing, rags. Thin scraps of what might have once been tactical gear, shredded and frozen into uselessness. Her skin was a terrifying waxy blue, the kind of blue that came after pink had given up and white had taken over. A deep gash split her temple, the blood frozen into a grotesque crimson mask that made one side of her face look like a shattered porcelain doll. She wasn't breathing. Kyle reached out with a gloved hand, his first instinct to check for a pulse. Any flicker of life, anything. His fingers brushed her frozen cheek, and Thor detonated. It wasn't a thought, it wasn't a feeling. It was a physical assault, a spiritual nuclear explosion that ripped through Kyle's consciousness like a freight train through tissue paper. The ancient primal force that lived inside him, the beast that held the lineage of kings that had chosen every alpha in his bloodline for 1,000 years, rose up and screamed. Seraphine. The name echoed in Kyle's skull with the force of an avalanche. It was a sound of pure, undiluted agony, of recognition, of loss and discovery happening simultaneously, ripping his soul in two directions at once. Kyle's blood turned to ice, colder than the storm, colder than the corpse beneath his hands. He stared at the woman's still face. He had never seen her before in his life. He knew every pack, every bloodline, every face of note in the northern territories. This woman was a stranger, but Thor knew her. Thor knew her like he knew the moon, like he knew the taste of fresh kill, like he knew the difference between home and exile. Kyle's hands moved on their own. He ripped off his heavy tactical coat, the one that had kept him alive through 100 patrols worse than this, and gathered the frozen woman into his arms. She was light, terrifyingly so, like holding a bird with hollow bones. Her body offered no resistance, no tension, nothing. She was dead. She had to be. But Thor was howling, not with grief, with command. Fix her, mine, now. Draven. Kyle's roar was barely human. It was the sound of an alpha whose wolf had taken the reins and was driving straight toward madness. Get the healers, light the signal fire now. Draven appeared at his side, his eyes widening in horror at the scene, at the corpse in Kyle's arms, at the look on his alpha's face. Kyle, she's... Draven's voice cracked. She's gone. We can't... She is not gone. Kyle bellowed. The alpha command in his voice, the one that could drop lesser wolves to their knees, made Draven physically flinch. Kyle wrapped the woman tighter in his coat, shielding her from the wind with his own body. His massive frame curled around her like a wall. His own body heat, blazing with the furnace of an alpha's metabolism, surrounded her like armor. I said light the fire. Kyle's voice dropped to something more terrifying than a shout. Something quiet. Absolute. Tell them to prepare the king's healing chambers. Tell the Moonshadow to be ready. Tell her to prepare for the impossible. Draven recognized that tone, the one that said arguing would be worse than futile. It would be suicidal. He fumbled for his flint and signal canister, his scarred hands shaking and not from the cold. Kyle stared down at the face in his arms. Her eyelids were translucent, delicate. He could see the veins beneath them, a spider web of blue that looked like frost patterns on glass. Her lips were a deep, terrifying purple. She wasn't breathing. He didn't care. His wolf knew her. His wolf, who had rejected thousands of suitable females over 10 years, who had turned away from every unmated she-wolf in the northern territories, who had held out for a fated mate Kyle had stopped, believing existed, had howled her name. Kyle pressed his face into her frozen hair. The scent of jasmine was stronger here. Impossible and undeniable. Sweet and floral in a world of pine and ice. Hold on, Seraphine, he whispered into the storm. His voice broke. Kyle Stormbringer, Alpha King of the most powerful pack in Alaska, who had never broken in 3 decades of war and politics and loss, broke over a stranger's corpse. Whoever you are, whatever you are, hold on. He turned and began the impossible run back to the citadel. 1/2 mile, through a blizzard, carrying dead weight that might actually be dead, driven by a primal certainty that was more terrifying than any storm. Behind him, an orange flare shot into the white sky, the emergency signal, the one that meant Alpha in danger. Prepare for arrival. The Citadel would see it. They would be ready. They had to be. Because Kyle Stormbringer was bringing home either a miracle or a corpse, and he wasn't sure which would destroy him more. The healing chambers of the Frostpeak Citadel were carved from the mountain's heart. Ancient stone smoothed by centuries of use formed walls that ran with moisture from the geothermal springs that heated the space. Steam rose in lazy curls, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a fever dream than reality. It was a place of deep, quiet magic, and right now it was a war zone. Dr. Elara Moonshadow moved with the precision of a surgeon and the authority of a general. At 65, her face was a roadmap of wrinkles that told stories of 1,000 healings, 100 impossible cases, and more than a few failures that still haunted her sleep. Her eyes sharp and dark as obsidian missed nothing. Right now they were cataloging death. Core body temperature is 79 degrees Fahrenheit. Elara said, her voice clinically calm even as her hands worked with desperate speed. She's been clinically dead for at least 45 minutes, possibly an hour. The cold preserved her, but Kyle. She looked up, meeting his gaze. This is beyond medicine. This is miracle territory. She returned to her examination. Multiple fractures. Ribs 2 through 5 on the left side. Right radius. Left femur. This head wound. She paused, her fingers gentle on the frozen gash. This wasn't from a fall. This was deliberate. Someone hit her with something heavy. Metal, probably. Kyle stood in the corner like a statue carved from granite. He hadn't moved since depositing the woman Seraphine, his mind insisted, even though he had no right to that name, onto the bed of warm furs. His tactical coat was still soaked. His hair was frozen into spikes. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes burned. She was attacked, he stated, not a question. A verdict, yes. Elara didn't soften it, didn't try to cushion the blow, and left for dead. The cold is what saved her in a way, slowed the bleeding, slowed her metabolism, put her in a state of suspended animation. But Kyle, she looked up again. The trauma is deep, not just physical. I can feel magical interference. Something has been done to her mind. If she wakes. When? Kyle growled. When she wakes. Elara corrected smoothly. She may not be the same. Memory loss is likely. Personality changes are possible. And there's something else. Elara pulled back the tattered remains of the woman's clothing, carefully, respectfully, and revealed her torso, scars, precise marks carved into pale skin, each one deliberate, evidence of training and survival. These are combat wounds, Elara said quietly. Knife defense here, sword training here, this one across the ribs that's from a blade that nearly gutted her. She survived, healed, kept fighting. The old healer counted carefully. 14 distinct scars, some recent, some years old. This woman has been training and fighting since childhood. Kyle, this woman isn't a victim. She's a warrior, a trained killer. The words hit Kyle like a physical blow, not a damsel, a weapon. His wolf surged with something that felt like pride. Ours, strong, worthy. Leave me, Kyle commanded. Elara looked up, her expression unreadable. My king she needs. She needs me, Kyle interrupted. His voice dropped, edged with the alpha command that could compel obedience from anyone not strong enough to resist. I will know the second she stirs. I will call you. But right now she needs to know she's not alone. She needs to feel. He trailed off, struggling for words he'd never had to say before. The bond, Elara finished softly. Kyle met her gaze, nodded once. Elara bowed her head. She knew better than to argue with an alpha whose wolf had awakened. She gestured to her 3 assistants, and they filed out quietly, leaving the king alone with the wounded stranger. Kyle moved to the bedside. He pulled a stool close and finally sat. His large calloused hands hovered over hers where they lay motionless on the furs. Her hand was delicate, lost in the furs. Pale fingers, long and elegant. the hands of someone who made art or music. Except for the calluses. Kyle traced them gently. Sword calluses on the palm, knife grips on the thumb and forefinger. The distinctive pattern of someone who'd held weapons more often than anything else. A warrior's hands. He finally rested his palm near her head, his thumb brushing a damp lock of black hair from her cheek. The contact sent electricity through his arm. The mate bond. He could feel it now. A silver thread so thin and frayed it was barely there. Like spider silk stretched across a chasm. One wrong move and it would snap completely. But it was there. This was her. The one he'd waited for. The one his wolf had refused to settle without. The one who had been stolen, attacked, and thrown away like garbage. A rage so potent, it made his vision swim rose in him like magma. It was a cold rage, the dangerous kind. The kind that didn't explode. It calculated. It planned. It waited. And when it struck, it annihilated. His hand moved unconsciously to the inner pocket of his tunic. To the small object he'd carried there for 20 years. A wooden wolf, crudely carved but cherished. A gift from someone. He couldn't remember who, just that it was important. He'd been 10. At a summit his father had dragged him to, by a river, crying because his father had died the week before and the weight of the throne felt like it would crush him. A little girl had sat beside him, 7 maybe, dark hair, kind eyes. She'd carved the wolf with a small knife skillfully he remembered now and pressed it into his palm. "You won't always be sad," she'd said. "Someone will find you, I promise." He'd kept the carving ever since, a talisman against loneliness. Now looking at this woman, his wolf stirred with recognition. Connected. Always connected. Kyle's breath caught, but he pushed the thought away. Impossible. That girl would be 27 now. This woman looked about 25. The age was close, but impossible. "I will find who did this," Kyle promised the unconscious woman. His voice was barely a whisper. "I will tear them limb from limb. I will scatter their remains across the tundra, and I will make them beg for death before I grant it." The promise hung in the steaming case like an oath sworn on blood. Kyle settled in to wait. Time lost meaning in the healing chambers. Kyle sat for a day, then a night, then another day. Draven came, brought reports. Kyle ignored them. Food was left. It grew cold. Kyle didn't touch it. The council demanded his presence. Kyle sent them away with a snarl that made grown alphas flinch. He just watched her, pouring his own alpha strength into this room, into the air, into the impossible hope that will alone could drag her back from whatever dark place she'd gone. On the morning of the third day, her eyelids flickered. It was such a small movement, barely perceptible, but Kyle's wolf lunged forward in his mind, pressing against his consciousness like a physical weight. Awake, ours, coming back. Kyle leaned forward, his heart hammering against his ribs like a prisoner demanding release. Seraphine. Her eyes, when they finally opened, were the color of warm earth, a deep soft brown that reminded him of river stones and autumn leaves. They were hazy at first, unfocused. They drifted around the room, taking in stone walls, steaming pools, warm furs, flickering torchlight. Then they landed on him, and her entire body went rigid, her pupils dilated. Her breathing, which had been slow and steady, spiked into something faster. Panicked, her hands, those calloused warrior hands, clenched in the furs. Kyle saw it happen in real time, training taking over. Her eyes mapped the room in 2 seconds flat, not like someone waking from injury, like someone assessing a combat zone. 3 exits, 1 door, 2 windows, both defensible. Her gaze landed on the guard outside the door, visible through the slightly ajar entrance. Hostiles present, unknown numbers, then back to Kyle. Primary threat, alpha level, close quarters. She moved. It was so fast, Kyle's human eyes almost missed it. 1 second, she was lying motionless in the furs. The next, She was on her feet, swaying from injury, but standing a scalpel she'd somehow palmed from Elara's medical tray, gripped in her right hand. Before Kyle could even raise his hands in peace, she closed the distance. 3 steps. Perfect balance despite broken ribs. The scalpel went to Kyle's throat. The blade kissed his skin. Not cutting, not yet, but promising that it could with the slightest pressure. "Who are you?" Her voice was a dry rasp, hoarse from disuse, but steady, controlled. "Where am I? What do you want?" Kyle froze, not from fear. He could have disarmed her in half a second, could have had her on the ground before her training, fogged mind even registered the movement. But he didn't. Because his wolf was singing, strong, worthy, ours, and because something in her eyes beyond the panic, beyond the survival instinct was breaking. A deep fundamental confusion that went beyond not recognizing him. She didn't recognize herself.
"You're safe," Kyle said slowly, carefully. His hands came up in the universal gesture of surrender. "I'm Kyle Stormbringer. I found you in the snow 3 days ago. You were dying. I brought you here, to my citadel. You're in the Frost Peak Pack territory, Alaska. You're safe. I swear it." He watched her process that, watched her eyes flick to his raised hands to the open door where guards stood at attention, but not advancing to the room itself, healing equipment, not torture implements. Checking his story against reality. Her hand trembled, just slightly. "Kyle," she repeated, testing the name, finding no recognition in it. Then her face, already pale, went absolutely white. "The snow. She squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them, they were drowning in confusion, in fear that cut deeper than any blade. "I don't remember any snow. I don't remember." Her voice cracked. "What's my name? I can't. I don't." The scalpel wavered, and then she collapsed. Kyle caught her before she hit the ground. His massive arms wrapped around her fragile frame, lowering her gently back to the furs. Her breathing was ragged now, panicked. Her eyes, those warm brown eyes, were wide with a horror that cut deeper than any physical wound. "My name," she whispered. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks, cutting tracks through the grime and dried blood. "I don't know my name. I don't know who I am." A cold dread settled in Kyle's stomach like lead. This wasn't normal amnesia. This was surgical, complete, devastating. Every memory, every identity, every piece of self, gone. But her skills remained. The warrior training, the combat instincts, the ability to assess and attack in seconds. Someone had erased her mind but left her body's knowledge intact. Why? He stared at her. The woman his wolf had screamed for. The woman he'd instinctively known was his fated mate. She had no idea who she was. "It's all right," he said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "We'll figure it out. I swear it. But right now you need to rest. You're injured, multiple broken bones, head trauma. You're safe here. I give you my oath, my word, as Alpha King. No one will harm you in this place." He couldn't call her Seraphine. Thor had howled it with such certainty, but the woman staring up at him with terrified eyes didn't know that name. Using it would only frighten her more. He needed something simpler, softer, a name she could hold on to while her true identity remained hidden. "Sarah," he said gently, "until you remember. We'll call you Sarah. Is that all right?" She looked at him, really looked, seeing him for the first time, not as a threat but as something else. Someone offering a lifeline in a sea of blank emptiness. Her lips moved, testing the name. "Sarah," she whispered. It wasn't right. It didn't fit the way Seraphine had resonated in his wolf's howl, but it was something. A drowning person accepting a piece of driftwood. "Sarah," she repeated, stronger now, clinging to it desperately. "Okay, Sarah, I'm Sarah." Kyle called for Elara with a hoarse shout. His mind was reeling. His wolf was howling with baffled possessiveness. He had found his mate, only to discover she was a ghost, a nameless, terrified warrior whose past had been violently erased. And somewhere out there, someone who tried to kill her was still breathing. That Kyle decided with cold certainty was a problem he intended to solve permanently. The next 5 days passed in a strange, tense rhythm. Sarah healed, her body at least. Elara's skills and the pack's natural accelerated healing mended broken bones with remarkable speed. The gash on her temple closed, leaving a thin scar that would fade with time. The blue tinge left her skin. Color returned to her lips. But her mind remained fractured. She remembered nothing. No faces, no places, no names, no history. Just skills. And that was what terrified the court. On the 5th day after her awakening, Kyle brought her a knife. Simple, balanced, the kind any warrior would recognize. He placed it on the table in her chambers, the suite he'd given her 20 feet from his own heavily guarded but comfortable, and stepped back. "Pick it up," he said. Sarah looked at him warily. She'd been wary of everyone since waking, flinching at sudden movements, positioning herself near exits, sleeping with one eye open. But curiosity won. She picked up the knife, and her entire body language changed. The wariness melted away. Her shoulders settled into a fighter's stance. Her weight distributed perfectly. Her grip on the handle was textbook thumb. Along the spine, 3 fingers wrapped pinky, providing stability. She flipped it once, caught it, flipped it again, then moved through a series of attack and defense patterns, so fluid they looked like a dance. Slash, parry, reverse grip, throat strike, disarm, kill shot. 30 seconds of perfect deadly choreography. Kyle watched in silence, his wolf preening with pride. Then she stopped, looked down at the knife in her hand like it had betrayed her, looked up at him with eyes full of confusion and something that might have been horror. "I don't know who taught me that," she whispered, "but someone taught me well." "You're a soldier," Kyle said. Not a question, a statement. "I don't know." Her hands, which had been so steady with the blade, trembled now. "But my body does. It knows." "How is that possible? How can I remember how to kill, but not remember my own name?" "Magic," Kyle said grimly. "Someone used powerful magic to erase your memories. But they couldn't erase muscle memory, physical training. Your body remembers what your mind has forgotten." "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why would someone do this to me? I don't know, but I'm going to find out." The council was less impressed than Kyle. "She could be an assassin," Elder Thornwood argued during a private meeting in Kyle's study. "The old wolf was 80 if he was a day his face like weathered bark. Sent to infiltrate, to kill you in your sleep. The amnesia could be faked." "She had no pulse when I found her," Kyle countered coldly. "Her core temperature was 79 degrees. She was dead for nearly an hour. You can't fake that." "Perhaps the amnesia came after." "She's under my protection," Kyle interrupted. His voice dropped to that quiet, absolute tone that made even elders shut up. "That makes her pack. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Are we clear?" Thornwood bowed his head, but his eyes said he wasn't convinced. Kyle didn't care. Let them whisper. Let them doubt. Sarah was his to protect, his to figure out. And he would. 7 days after her rescue, everything changed. The week had passed in a strange rhythm of healing and mystery. Sarah had begun venturing beyond her chambers. She favored the library, perhaps because books didn't ask questions she couldn't answer, or perhaps because reading came easily to her fractured mind. She could read, could write, could speak eloquently when needed. But ask her about her childhood, her family, her past, blank. Kyle had spent the week balancing his duties as king, which had been severely neglected with monitoring Sarah's recovery. Every evening he found excuses to visit her chambers, bringing books, discussing pack politics, teaching her about the territory, building trust. And every evening the mate bond grew stronger, the silver thread thickening, warming from cold metal to something almost golden. Sarah felt it too. He could see it in the way her eyes found him across crowded rooms, the way she relaxed when he entered a space, the way her breathing synchronized with his when they stood close. She didn't understand it, but she felt it. On the morning of the 8th day, Damien Nightshade arrived, Kyle's cousin, 32, handsome in the way that predators are handsome, sleek and polished and dangerous. Where Kyle was granite and steel, Damien was silver and shadow. He had inherited their grandfather's gift for charm for politics, for saying exactly what people wanted to hear. He was also the only other living wolf with a legitimate claim to the Alpha King's throne. Cousin, Damien's voice boomed across the great hall as he swept in trailing guards and servants, and the general chaos that followed him like a cape. You look exhausted. Ruling a kingdom and nursing a stray, too much even for you, I think. Kyle rose from his throne. The greeting was expected, the embrace was cold. Damien, your visit is unexpected. I came as soon as I heard. Damien pulled back his smile all teeth. A mysterious woman, a reclusive king. How could I not investigate such fascinating gossip? His eyes swept the hall, hunting. Kyle felt his wolf bristle. She's recovering. She's not. There she is. Sarah had entered through the side door. She'd been in the library, her favorite refuge now, and was heading back to her chambers when she'd heard the commotion. She froze when she saw the crowd. Her eyes found Kyle first, always, like a compass finding north, then slid to Damien. And something happened. Kyle saw it. Draven standing at his shoulders saw it. Sarah's entire body went rigid. Her right hand twitched toward her hip where a weapon would be if she were armed. Her nostrils flared slightly as if scenting something foul, prey scenting predator. But more than that, recognition scenting enemy. Sarah, Kyle called gently. Come here. She moved toward him, slowly, never taking her eyes off Damien, moving like someone crossing a battlefield, aware that one wrong step could be fatal. Smart girl. Cousin, may I present Sarah, Kyle said, formally placing himself subtly between them. She's under my protection while she recovers from injuries sustained in our territory. Damien's smile widened. He moved forward with the grace of a dancer extending a hand. But Kyle saw it, the micro-expression, the flash across Damien's face when he first saw Sarah, shock, quickly buried, replaced with charm. But there, for a split second, Damien knew her. Sarah, what a beautiful name for a beautiful mystery. It's an honor. Sarah looked at his hand like it might bite her, like touching it would burn her flesh from her bones. After a long uncomfortable moment, she took it, briefly. Her grip was firm but quick. She pulled away as fast as politeness allowed, wiping her palm on her dress, as if to clean something foul from her skin. My lord, she said quietly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wild. You're too kind. Nonsense. Damien's voice was warm honey, soothing, trustworthy. Everything his eyes were not. My cousin is not known for keeping guests locked away up here in the frozen north. I hope you're finding our hospitality acceptable. There was something in the way he said it, some underlying current that made Kyle's wolf snarl, testing her, probing for information. I'm grateful for the king's protection, Sarah said carefully, each word chosen with precision. Of course, of course. Damien tilted his head, studying her with eyes that were just a shade too intense, like a scientist examining a specimen. I must confess, I heard an interesting rumor in my travels. Someone suggested your name might actually be Seraphine, a lovely old world name. Does it ring any bells? Kyle's blood ran cold. How did Damien know that name? Only Kyle and Ilara knew what Tor had howled. He told no one else, not even Draven. It was a secret held close, too precious and too dangerous to share. So how did Damien know? Sarah's expression flickered. Confusion, frustration, a flicker of something that might have been pain, like a migraine striking behind her eyes. No. I'm sorry. I don't think so. Her voice was small, lost. Nothing feels familiar, not even that. And for just a fraction of a second, so quick, a normal human would have missed it. Something flashed across Damien's face. Relief, pure undiluted relief. Then it was gone, buried under another charming smile. A pity. Well, Sarah it is. Welcome to Frost Peak, my dear. I do hope your stay is enlightening. He bowed, perfectly courteous, and walked away. But Kyle saw him signal one of his men, saw the guard nod and slip from the hall. Something was happening, something Kyle didn't understand yet, but he would. Sarah turned to Kyle the moment Damien was out of earshot. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. I don't trust him, she said quietly, firm, certain in a way she hadn't been certain about anything since waking. Why? I don't know. Her hands clenched into fists. Every instinct I have left is screaming at me that he's dangerous, that I need to run, or fight, or... She trailed off, frustrated. I don't know why, but he's wrong. Something about him is fundamentally wrong. Kale believed her, not because of evidence, not because of logic, because of the certainty in her voice. The same certainty that had let her disarm a guard while barely conscious. The same certainty that made her hands remember combat, even when her mind remembered nothing. Sarah's instincts had kept her alive when everything else failed. He would trust them now. Stay close to me tonight, he said. During dinner, don't let him corner you alone. Relief washed over her face like sunrise after endless night. Thank you for believing me. Kyle met her eyes, warm brown finding ice-gray steel. I will always believe you, Sarah. Always. The promise hung between them, the first real thread of trust. Fragile, precious, and absolutely crucial for what was coming. Because that night when Sarah finally fell into exhausted sleep, the nightmares would begin in earnest, and they would change everything. The nightmare came at 3 in the morning. Kyle was in his study, reviewing border patrol reports he'd ignored for over a week, when the scream ripped through the stone corridors of the citadel. It wasn't the scream of fear he'd heard when Sarah first woke. This was something else, something primal and raw and absolutely terrified. The scream of someone reliving their own murder. He was at her door in 5 seconds flat. Draven was right behind him, along with 3 guards who'd been stationed in the hallway. Kyle waved them back with a sharp gesture and entered, alone, his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to break free. Sarah was tangled in her sheets, her body drenched in sweat despite the cool mountain air. Her eyes were open but unseeing, staring at something only she could perceive. Her hands clawed at the air like she was fighting invisible enemies. Sarah! Kyle crossed the room in 3 strides, sitting on the edge of her bed. You're safe. It's just a dream. You're safe. Her eyes snapped to him. For a moment, she didn't recognize him, saw only threat. Her hand lashed out, nails raking across his forearm, hard enough to draw blood. Then awareness flooded back and she collapsed forward, her forehead hitting his chest as sobs racked her fragile frame. The snow, she gasped, her fingers digging into his shirt with desperate strength. I was running. It was so cold. My feet were numb. I couldn't feel my fingers. And he was there, behind me, in the shadows. I couldn't see his face, but I could hear him. He was laughing. Kyle wrapped his arms around her, feeling the tremors that shook her body like earthquake aftershocks. His wolf howled with the need to comfort, to protect, to destroy whoever had put that terror in her voice. Who? His voice was sharper than he intended, edged with barely controlled rage. Who was there, Sarah? I don't know. She squeezed her eyes shut, her breath coming in ragged gasps that bordered on hyperventilation. I can't see his face, just shadows. And his voice. God, his voice. He said. She choked on the words, had to force them out past the constriction in her throat. He said, the prophecy dies tonight. The king will never have you. The moon's chosen will be forgotten. Kyle went absolutely still. Prophecy, the king, moon's chosen. Those weren't random words. Those were specific, ancient, connected to things that shouldn't exist anymore. Connected to the carving in the Chamber of Echoes, to the legend of the White Wolf, to her. Sarah. He pulled back, slightly, his hands on her shoulders, making her look at him. What else? What else did he say? Try to remember. I don't know. Tears streamed down her face, hot against her cold skin. That's all I can remember. Everything else is just shadows and cold and blood, and the sound of him laughing while I bled out in the snow, while I died. Her voice rose to something near hysteria. Kyle, I'm so scared. What if I did something terrible? What if I was running because I deserved to die? What if I'm a monster who... No. The command in his voice made her flinch, but he didn't soften it. Couldn't. This delusion had to be killed now before it took root. Whatever happened to you was not deserved. You are not on trial here. You are not guilty until proven innocent. You were attacked, murdered, and whoever did it is still out there. He pulled her back against his chest, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her head like she was something infinitely precious. His voice dropped to something gentler, something almost desperate. Hold on, Sarah, please. Just hold on. We'll figure this out. I swear it on my life, on my throne, on everything I am. I will find who did this to you, and I will make them pay. She clung to him until her sobs quieted into ragged breathing and then into the deeper rhythm of exhausted sleep. Kyle held her, rocking slightly, his own mind spinning with implications and connections and rage. The prophecy dies tonight. The king will never have you. Someone had tried to kill her specifically to prevent her from reaching him, to stop whatever destiny had been written in ancient texts, to murder fate itself. And Damien's question from earlier echoed in his mind like a death knell. Does the name Seraphine ring any bells? That flicker of relief when she'd said no. Damien knew something, knew who she was, knew what she was. And if Damien knew, Kyle's blood turned to ice. If Damien knew, and Damien was relieved she didn't remember. Was Damien involved in her attempted murder? Kyle didn't move until dawn light crept through the window. Didn't let her go until he was certain the nightmares wouldn't return. When he finally stood, his muscles protesting from hours in the same position, he made a decision. It was time to show her the truth, even if the truth was impossible, even if it terrified her. Because whoever had tried to kill her would try again, and she needed to understand what she was, what she'd been, what she could become. She needed to know about the prophecy, about the white wolf, about destiny. The Chamber of Echoes was a place few ever saw. Deep beneath the citadel, carved into the living rock by the first Alpha King 1,000 years ago, it was a repository of history, of memory, of truth written in stone where no one could burn it or revise it or pretend it didn't exist. Kyle led Sarah down the spiral stairs 2 days after her first nightmare. She'd had 4 more since then, each one the same. Running through snow, the shadow figure, the laughing voice, the same terrible words that made no sense but felt true in a way that transcended memory. She was exhausted, haunted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She jumped at shadows, and she was desperate for answers. Her hand found his in the darkness of the stairwell, not from fear, from trust. That simple gesture nearly undid him. What is this place? Sarah's whisper echoed in the cold, still air, coming back to them like ghosts speaking from stone. Our history, Kyle said. Our truth, the things we don't want forgotten, the things that matter so much we carved them in stone that will outlast kingdoms. The chamber opened before them, massive, cathedral-like in its scope and grandeur. The walls were covered in carvings, scenes of battles, of ceremonies of wolves running beneath an endless moon, generations of history compressed into rock. But it was the far wall that made Sarah stop breathing. A single enormous carving dominated the space, 20 feet tall, 30 feet wide, rendered in exquisite detail by artisans who'd poured their souls into immortalizing a legend. It showed the first Alpha King Lycaon, the unifier, standing beside a wolf. But not just any wolf. This one was massive, spectral, clearly female from her elegant lines and graceful stance. Her form seemed to shimmer even in stone, as if the ancient carvers had somehow captured moonlight in rock and frozen it for eternity. She was a dire wolf, larger than any natural animal, had a right to be, powerful, ancient, and she was white, pure as fresh snow, pristine as starlight. Her eyes, even in stone, seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. The artist had somehow captured wisdom and power and infinite compassion in carved rock. What? Sarah's voice failed her. She took a step forward, then another, drawn to the image like a moth to flame. The legends say the first king was not alone, Kyle said quietly. He led her closer to the carving, his voice taking on the cadence of a story told and retold for 1,000 years. A story that had become almost sacred in its repetition. He was bonded to a white wolf, a female of a bloodline thought long lost, a dire wolf of immense power. They called her kind the Moon's Chosen, creatures of immense healing magic, protective enchantments, spiritual strength that could turn back darkness itself. His hand traced the outline of the white wolf's form, following the curve of her spine, the sweep of her tail. Together, they united the warring packs, brought an age of peace that lasted 300 years. Their bond was the first true mate bond, the template for all others, the standard by which all love has been measured since. When she died, they say, half his soul went with her. He lived another 50 years, never took another mate, never even looked at another female. And when he finally passed, they say he died with her name on his lips. They carved this so no one would forget, so the legend would live forever. Sarah stared at the image transfixed. Something in her chest ached, a grief that made no sense, a longing for something she'd never known, a sense of recognition that couldn't possibly be real. Why are you showing me this? Her voice was barely audible. Kyle pointed to the runes carved beneath the image, ancient script, the kind that predated modern language, that had been old when the pyramids were young. She left a prophecy, the last white wolf. Before she died, she spoke words that were recorded and preserved, carved here so they could never be lost or altered. He began to read, his voice resonating in the stone chamber, the words seeming to gain power as they echoed. The line of Lycon will rule, but will be tested. War will come from without and within. Darkness will rise. The packs will splinter. Blood will be spilled. Only when the king's wolf cries the lost name shall the white wolf return. The true mate will be found. The bond will be forged in ice and sealed in blood. And the age of peace will dawn again. But beware, when moon's light rises, shadow's darkness wakes. The balance demands its price. Silence fell like snow, heavy, profound, suffocating. Sarah turned to him slowly. Her eyes were wide, her face pale as the white wolf in the carving. My dream, she whispered, her voice shaking. The prophecy dies tonight. That's what he said. That's what the voice in my nightmare said. Yes, and your wolf. Her voice was trembling now, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. When you found me, you said he howled something, a name you wouldn't tell me, a name you've been hiding. Kyle met her gaze. The full, devastating weight of his secret laid bare. No more hiding, no more protection, just truth, raw and terrible. When I knelt by you in the snow, my wolf didn't just growl, he howled, threw his head back and screamed with a desperation I've never felt in 30 years of life. Not a growl of possession, not a claim of territory, a roar of recognition, of a soul finding its other half after searching for lifetimes. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but in the silent chamber it rang like thunder. He howled, Seraphine. The name hung in the cold air like a physical thing, like speaking it had given it weight and substance, like it could be felt. Sarah stumbled backward, her back hitting the wall. Her hands came up to her head, shaking violently. No, that's impossible. I'm not. Look at me. Her voice cracked, rising toward hysteria. I'm broken. I can't even remember my own face. I can't remember if I have parents or siblings or friends or anything. I'm not a legendary creature. I'm not some mystical wolf. I'm just a woman who can't remember who she is. Your wolf is dormant, Kyle said, He took a step toward her, his hand extended like he was approaching a frightened animal. Blocked. Suppressed by the same magic that erased your memories. The attack wasn't random, Sarah. Someone knew who you were. They knew what you were. They tried to kill you to stop this. To stop the prophecy from completing. He took another step, closing the distance between them. To stop us! Sarah's back was against the wall now. Nowhere left to retreat. Her eyes were wild, darting between Kael and the carving, like she was trying to reconcile impossible realities. The true mate, she breathed the words, barely making it past her lips.
You think that we're fated mates, Kael finished. He was close now, close enough to touch, but he didn't. Gave her space to process, space to choose. I don't just think it, I know it. Every instinct, every fiber of my being. My wolf knows you, has been waiting for you for 30 years. And someone tried to murder you, succeeded in murdering you, to prevent us from meeting. To prevent the prophecy from fulfilling itself. To stop the age of peace from dawning. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, cutting tracks through skin that had gone pale as death. I can't be her. I can't be this legendary thing you're describing. I'm nobody. I'm nothing. You are everything. The words came out fierce, absolute, brooking no argument. You survived an execution. You clawed your way back from death itself. You've been fighting your way back to consciousness and strength for 2 weeks against odds that would have killed anyone else. You have the instincts of an elite warrior and the heart of someone who refuses to quit even when every rational reason says you should. You are not nothing, Sarah. You are the strongest person I've ever met. The bravest. The most. He cut himself off. Too much. Too fast. She was overwhelmed. She looked at him through her tears, really seeing him. All of him. The king. The warrior. The man who'd sat vigil over her corpse for 3 days. Who'd held her through nightmares. Who'd given her a name when she had none and protection when she was defenseless, who was telling her she was something impossible. This is too much, she whispered, her voice breaking. The king, the prophecy, the attack, the mate bond. I can't. I need. She stood abruptly, swayed, steadied herself against the wall. I need air. I need to think. She fled, ran from the chamber like the shadows themselves were chasing her. Like staying 1 more second would shatter what remained of her sanity. Kyle let her go, because pushing would break her, and he needed her whole for what was coming. But what he couldn't see from his position in the chamber was the figure, hidden in a shadowed alcove near the entrance. Damien Nightshade, watching, listening, recording every word on a spelled crystal that would let him replay the conversation at will. His handsome face twisted into something ugly, something that revealed the rot beneath the charm. Closer than I thought, he murmured to himself, his voice barely audible, even in the echoing chamber. Much closer. The amnesia was supposed to be permanent. The witch swore it. 5,000 gold pieces for a spell that couldn't be broken. And now he's telling her stories, making connections, pushing her toward remembering. His hand clenched into a fist nails, digging into his palm hard enough to draw blood. He'd raised Seraphine from a child, taken her in after murdering her parents, though she'd never known that part, spent 15 years training her, molding her, teaching her to be a weapon, a tool, his tool, to seize the throne that should have been his by right of age and ambition. The white wolf, the prophecy, the power that could make an alpha king into an emperor. It should have been his. And then she turned 20, had sensed the mate bond stirring, had somehow impossibly recognized Kael across miles of territory without ever meeting him. And she'd refused to kill him, refused to be used. I won't murder my mate, she'd said, her eyes blazing with defiance. I don't care what you trained me for. I don't care about your plans. I won't do it. So he tried to kill her instead. Apparently not well enough. No matter, Damien said softly, his mind already racing through contingencies and backup plans.
She doesn't remember me, doesn't remember anything. The blocks are still in place, weakening perhaps, but there. And Kyle won't risk her by pushing too hard. He's too honorable. The word was acid on his tongue. I just need to ensure she never gets those memories back. And if she won't die gracefully, he smiled, cold and calculating. Perhaps she can be convinced to run, to leave, to spare dear cousin Kyle the pain of watching his fated mate reject him when she finally learns the truth of what she is, what she was meant to be. He turned and melted back into the shadows, his footsteps silent on stone, his mind already weaving new plans. Planning the next move, the killing stroke. 3 days later, Alpha Vincent Bloodfang of the Black Ridge Pack arrived for the rescheduled summit. He was everything his name suggested, 50 years old. Built like a tank, 6'6" of solid muscle and scar tissue. Face covered in marks from a lifetime of border wars and territory disputes. He'd held the Black Ridge territory for 25 years through sheer ferocity and tactical brilliance, turning what had been a weak, scattered pack into one of the strongest in the northern territories. He was also deeply fundamentally suspicious of weakness in any form. You risk a trade war for a nameless woman, King Kyle. Vincent's voice was gravel sliding down a mountainside as they stood in Kyle's study, reviewing the proposed alliance terms. My scouts tell me she's been here for 2 weeks. No identification, no pack affiliation, no history, and you've given her chambers near your own. Made her untouchable. The other packs are concerned. Oh, she has a name, Kyle said mildly, while looking up from the document he was reviewing. And she's earned her place here by surviving what should have killed her. That takes strength. Earned. Vincent's laugh was bitter, sharp. By what being found half dead? I've heard the whispers, Kyle. She remembers nothing. Could be a plant, could be an assassin with false amnesia, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Could be. She had no pulse when I found her. Kyle interrupted his voice, dropping to something dangerous. He looked up, meeting Vincent's gaze with ice-gray eyes that promised violence. Her core temperature was 79 degrees. She was clinically dead for nearly an hour. You can't fake that. The healers have records, medical documentation. She died, Vincent, and she came back. All the more reason to be suspicious. What survives death? What kind of creature? A strong one. Kyle set down the document with enough force to make the desk rattle. She's under my protection. That means she's under the protection of this alliance. Anyone who touches her from any pack answers to me. Is that going to be a problem, Alpha Vincent? Vincent held his gaze for a long moment, measuring, calculating. Finally, he grunted the closest thing to agreement the old warrior ever gave. Not from me, but my wolves are nervous. This whole situation is irregular. Unprecedented. We'll attend your feast tonight. We'll sign your treaty. But I'm keeping my guards close and my blades sharp. As you should. What neither of them knew, what they couldn't know, was that someone else was keeping guards close too. And those guards had very different orders. Orders that had been sealed with blood and gold. Orders that would end in death before the moon rose. The feast was held in the great hall that evening. A massive space with soaring ceilings and enormous fireplaces that did little to drive back the mountain cold. Long tables were laden with food, venison elk, wild boar, fresh bread, winter vegetables stored from harvest, imported wines, and local spirits. It was a show of abundance, of power, of the strength that came from a pack that could survive and thrive in one of the harshest territories in North America. Sarah sat at Kyle's right hand. It was a position of honor, one that hadn't been filled in the 10 years since Kyle became Alpha King. The court noticed. The visiting packs noticed. Everyone noticed. The whispers started immediately. Damien sat at Kyle's left, charm incarnate, telling hunting stories that had the table laughing, playing the role of beloved cousin and trusted advisor with the skill of a master actor. But Sarah felt his eyes on her every time she moved, every time she shifted, every time she breathed, watching, waiting, planning. Alpha Vincent sat across from Kyle's position of respect for a powerful ally. Grim-faced, drinking heavily, though his eyes remained sharp, tracking movement around the room with the paranoia of a man who'd survived 5 assassination attempts and wasn't eager for a 6th. The meal progressed. Toasts were made to alliance and prosperity. Tensions seemed to ease as wine flowed and food settled in bellies. Sarah pushed food around her plate, barely eating. Her instincts were screaming. Something was wrong. Something was coming. She could feel it like pressure before a storm, like electricity in the air before lightning strikes. She couldn't explain how she knew, but she knew. Danger, here, now. Close. Damien was in the middle of a particularly engaging story about a rogue pack he'd single-handedly driven from his territory, a lie Draven had told her privately, but an entertaining one when it happened. Alpha Vincent reached for his wine goblet, raised it to his lips in a toast to Kael's health and prosperity, drank deeply, and choked. It wasn't subtle. His hand flew to his throat, clawing at his own skin like he could dig out the poison by force. His face turned red, then purple. The chair crashed backward as he tried to stand, tried to breathe, tried to live. He managed 3 steps before his legs gave out. The hall exploded into chaos. Shouts, screams, Black Ridge warriors drawing weapons, Frostpeak guards responding in kind. The scrape of metal on metal as blades left sheaths. Sarah was on her feet instantly, her chair clattering behind her. Training screamed at her to run, to fight, to do something. But she was frozen, watching in horror as Alpha Vincent convulsed on the stone floor. His mouth opened in a silent scream. Silver-flecked foam bubbled from his lips like a grotesque parody of a rabid animal. His eyes, those sharp, suspicious eyes, went glassy, empty, dead. Doctor. Elara Moonshadow shoved through the crowd, her assistants right behind her. She dropped to her knees beside the dying dead Alpha. Her hands moved with desperate speed, checking pulse, checking eyes, checking the goblet he dropped, wine spilling across stone like blood. Poison, she said. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Clear, damning, final. Silver leaf extract, mixed with something else, something floral. She lifted the goblet to her nose, inhaled. Her ancient face went absolutely white. Jasmine oil. The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. Jasmine, her scent, the impossible scent Kael had smelled on her in the snow. The scent that shouldn't exist in this frozen wasteland. The scent that marked her as other. Sarah's eyes found Kael's across the hall and saw the war happening behind his ice-grey gaze. Saw his wolf howling to protect her. Saw his mind calculating political devastation. Saw duty and love tearing him apart. No, he couldn't think. He wouldn't believe a guard's shout made everyone turn. Here I found something. The guard, one of Damien's men, Sarah noticed with growing horror, was standing near her chair. His hand reached into the fur cushion of her seat, fingers probing like he knew exactly where to look. When he pulled his hand back, he held a small leather pouch. He opened it with theatrical slowness, sniffed. His face went pale as death. AlphaKing. The guard's voice shook or pretended to shake. It's silver leaf and dried jasmine flowers. The hall went absolutely silent. Every eye turned to Sarah. She stood frozen, her hands at her sides, her mind screaming denials that her mouth couldn't form. Her throat had closed, her lungs had stopped. Time itself seemed to stop. No, she managed. Her voice was barely a whisper, a broken sound. No, I didn't. I would never. The rogue assassin. Damien's voice cut through the shocked silence like a judge pronouncing sentence. He stood slowly, his face a perfect mask of false grief and real satisfaction. She was never nameless, was she? She was a plant sent to destabilize the kingdom, to shatter our alliances, to murder our allies one by one. And when our king took her in, protected her, cared for her, she saw her chance to strike. She's lying. Sarah's voice found strength rising from whisper to shout. She turned to Kyle, her eyes pleading desperate. Kyle, I swear on everything. I don't even know what silver leaf is. I've never seen that pouch before. I would never. Seize her. The command didn't come from Kyle. It came from Draven. The beta stepped forward. His scarred face twisted with something that looked like pain, like betrayal. Behind him, Black Ridge warriors had drawn their weapons, the distinctive ring of steel filling the hall. The threat was clear, crystal clear. Justice would be served or blood would be spilled. War would come. No. Kyle's roar shook the foundations of the hall. His wolf was on the surface now. His eyes blazed pure gold. Every hair on every wolf's body stood on end from the sheer power radiating from him. Alpha command, king's authority, the weight of a bloodline that had ruled for 1,000 years. He moved like lightning, placing his massive body between the advancing guards and Serra. A wall, immovable, absolute. Kyle. Damien's voice was gentle, reasonable, the voice of a man trying to talk someone off a ledge, trying to prevent tragedy. Cousin, be reasonable. The evidence is undeniable. An Alpha is dead. We have witnesses. We have proof. Justice must be served. The Black Ridge Pack demands it. The law demands it. His hand moved to his sword, just resting on the hilt. A subtle threat. Or are you truly so bewitched that you would protect an assassin? Would you betray your own kind? Betray your duty for a woman who murdered one of our greatest allies in cold blood? The hall held its breath. Every wolf there understood what was happening. This was more than an accusation. This was a challenge. Not physical, not yet, but political, social. Damien was forcing Kyle to choose between his duty as king and his bond as mate, between law and love, between his people and his heart. Serra looked at Kyle, saw the war raging behind his eyes, saw his wolf howling to protect her, to kill anyone who threatened her, saw his mind calculating the political devastation of shielding an accused assassin, saw the cost being tallied in real time. She saw the exact moment duty won. Take her to the cells, Kyle said. His voice was dead, empty. The voice of a king carving out his own heart with a dull blade and pretending it didn't hurt. She will be held for trial at dawn. Guards moved forward. Not Kyle's personal guard, they refused, standing stone-faced and immobile. But others. Black Ridge warriors, eager for vengeance for their fallen Alpha. Damien's men, ready to complete their orders. They grabbed Serra's arms with unnecessary force, fingers digging into flesh hard enough to bruise. She didn't fight. Couldn't. She was still staring at Kyle, at the man who'd promised to protect her, who'd sworn she was safe, who'd looked into her eyes and said he would always believe her, who was condemning her to death. "You promised," she whispered. The words were so quiet, but in the dead silence of the hall, they rang like a bell, like a death knell, like a heart breaking. "You promised I was safe." Kyle's face was a mask carved from ice and stone, but his eyes for just a moment betrayed him, showed the absolute agony of a man being torn apart from the inside, of a soul shattering. Then the mask slammed back down, impenetrable, cold. "Take her." They dragged her from the hall. Her feet barely touched the ground. The guards were not gentle. They wanted her to hurt, wanted her to pay. The last thing she saw was Damien's satisfied smile. And the last thing she felt was the mate bond, that fragile silver thread that had been slowly strengthening over 2 weeks, that had started to turn gold with promise, snap, like a violin string pulled too tight. The pain of it drove her to her knees. The guards thought it was fear. They had no idea it was her heart breaking, shattering into pieces so small they could never be put back together. The cells beneath the citadel were carved from the same stone as the healing chambers. But these were different. Cold, dark, damp from underground springs that made the air thick and hard to breathe. And they were lined with silver. Silver bars, silver shackles hanging from walls, silver dust mixed into the mortar. Enough silver to make even healthy wolves weak, to suppress shifting, to drain strength like a slow poison. They threw Sarah into one without ceremony. The door slammed with a clang that echoed like a death sentence. The lock clicked. Final. Absolute. Darkness swallowed her whole. She collapsed onto the stone bench that served as a bed, her legs finally giving out. Her mind was blank, numb. She couldn't process what had just happened. Couldn't reconcile the Kael who'd held her through nightmares with the king who'd condemned her with a single word. Couldn't understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had no meaning in the dark, in the cold, in the silence broken only by the drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Then footsteps. Torchlight. Dr. Elara Moonshadow appeared outside the bars, her torch casting dancing shadows that made her ancient face look like a death mask. "Child," she said softly, gently, the voice of a grandmother talking to a wounded grandchild. "I'm sorry. I tried to tell him. Did I do it?" Sarah's voice was hollow, dead. She didn't look up from the floor. Could I have, in some fugue state I don't remember, could I be a killer who doesn't know she's a killer? No. Elara's voice was absolute, certain. "I've been a healer for 45 years. I know poison. I know herbology and alchemy and the 1,000 ways to kill with plants and minerals. That compound. It requires specific knowledge, specific ingredients, specific timing. You've been under constant supervision since you arrived. Guards, servants, me. You couldn't have acquired the materials, mixed them with the precision required and planted them in your own seat without someone noticing. Then how did they get there? Someone put them there. Someone who wants you blamed. Someone who wants you dead." Sarah laughed. It was a broken sound, shattered glass, and bleeding hearts. "Doesn't matter. He believed them, or believed his duty over me. Either way, I'm here, in a cell, awaiting execution, and he's out there pretending his heart isn't breaking while his is." She finally looked up, meeting Elara's gaze. Or maybe it isn't. Maybe I imagined the bond, the connection. Maybe I wanted it so badly, I convinced myself it was real. "He's protecting you," Elara said urgently, stepping closer to the bars. "Child, you must understand, by putting you in custody, he's preventing Black Ridge from declaring blood vendetta, from killing you in that hall. He's buying time to find the truth. It doesn't feel like protection." Sarah's voice broke. "It feels like betrayal." "No," Elara admitted quietly. "I imagine it doesn't. But Kyle Stormbringer has never broken an oath in his life. He promised to protect you. He will find a way. You must have faith." The old healer reached through the bars, pressed something into Sarah's hand, a small vial of clear liquid. "For the pain," she said, "physical and otherwise. And child, don't lose faith. Not yet. Hold on until dawn, please." She left, taking the light with her. Sarah stared at the vial in her hand, then set it aside untouched, because the pain was all she had left. The only proof this was real, that she'd briefly had something beautiful before it was violently ripped away, that she'd been cared for before being condemned, that she'd been loved before being abandoned. She lay down on the stone bench, the cold seeping into her bones, closed her eyes, and waited for dawn, and the trial that would determine if she lived or died, knowing somehow that living without Kyle's trust would be its own kind of death. Kyle stood alone in his study. The fire had burned down to embers, casting barely enough light to see by. The reports on his desk were untouched, forgotten. His hands gripped the edge of the table, hard enough that the wood creaked in protest, the ancient oak threatening to splinter under the pressure of an alpha's strength. His wolf was howling, a constant unending scream of rage and grief and betrayal aimed at him. At the man who'd caged their mate, who'd chosen law over love, who'd broken every promise with a single word. Wrong. Protect her. Ours. Wrong. 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 The wolf's voice was so loud, it was physically painful, like nails scraping the inside of his skull, like his own soul was trying to tear itself apart in protest. "Shut up," Kyle snarled into the empty room. But Thor wouldn't shut up. Couldn't. The wolf was right and they both knew it. Every instinct screamed that Sarah was innocent, that she'd been framed, that the real killer was still free, probably celebrating while an innocent woman sat in a cell awaiting execution. But the evidence. A knock at the door interrupted his spiral. Enter. Draven came in, closed the door with careful precision, stood at attention though his eyes showed pain. Conflict. The Blackridge pack is demanding immediate execution. They want her head by noon tomorrow. Marcus Bloodfang Vincent's son, New Alpha, by right of succession is calling for blood vendetta. Says if you won't deliver justice, they will. By force if necessary. They'll get a trial, Dawn, as I said. Kyle. Draven's voice softened, the beta dropping formality in private as he always did. Brother, I know what she is to you, but the evidence is circumstantial. Kyle's voice was sharp enough to cut. No one saw her poison the wine. No one saw her plant the pouch. All we have is material in her seat and a victim who drank from a goblet that 50 people could have touched throughout the evening. Then why did you imprison her? Draven's confusion was genuine. If you don't believe she's guilty, because if I didn't, she'd be dead. Kyle finally looked up. His eyes were still gold. His wolf still too close to the surface, barely contained by will alone. Blackridge would have torn her apart in that hall. Damien's faction would have helped. Half the court wanted her blood before this happened. She's been an outsider, a threat since the moment I brought her here. I put her in custody to save her life. Now we have until dawn to prove she's innocent. Understanding dawned on Draven's scarred face like sunrise after endless night. You're going to use the gambit. Yes. Kyle, that ritual hasn't been invoked in 200 years. It's barbaric, dangerous. If it goes wrong, if the magic judges you as well and finds, it won't. Kyle's voice was absolute, unshakable. Because Sarah is innocent, and I'm going to prove it by putting my life on the line alongside hers. The King's Gambit, Blood Oath, accuser and accused bound by ancient magic. One lie and the oath burns the liar. Truth will be extracted one way or another. He smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of a predator who just spotted wounded prey. Let's see if dear cousin Damien is willing to stake his life on his accusations. Let's see if he's prepared to bleed for his lies. Draven was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. And if she is guilty, if somehow, despite everything she did do this, she didn't. But if then I die alongside her. Kyle's voice was calm, accepting. And you become Alpha King. The throne passes to you. You lead the pack. You sign the treaties. You fulfill the prophecy with whoever your fated mate turns out to be. But she's not guilty, Draven. I know it in my bones, in my blood, in my soul. And tomorrow everyone else will know it too. Draven bowed his head, accepting what couldn't be changed. Then I'll prepare the ritual chamber, gather the elders, retrieve the ceremonial blade and bowl, and pray to every god that's listening that you're right. I am. Draven left his footsteps heavy with the weight of what was coming. Kyle stood alone again. His hands were shaking, actually shaking. Kyle Stormbringer, who'd never trembled in 3 decades of war and politics and death, was shaking like a leaf in a storm. In 12 hours, he would either prove Sarah's innocence and expose a conspiracy, or he would die. There was no middle ground with the King's Gambit, no safety net, no second chances. The blood oath was absolute, truth or death, no exceptions. He walked to his window, looked out at the dark mountains' peaks barely visible against the darker sky. Somewhere below, in a cold cell, lined with silver, Sarah was alone. Terrified, betrayed, believing he'd abandoned her. Hold on, he whispered into the darkness, his breath fogging the glass. Please, Seraphine, hold on just a little longer. I'm coming. I swear it. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to save you. Just hold on. The wind carried his words away into the endless night. But somewhere in the citadel, in a shadowed corridor, far from prying eyes, Damien Nightshade heard them, through supernatural means, a spelled crystal he'd planted in Kyle's study weeks ago. A little insurance policy that had paid dividends beyond measure. And he smiled. The gambit, he murmured to himself, rolling the word around in his mouth like fine wine. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. He's going to stake his life on her innocence, going to bind himself to her fate. He pulled out a small silver dagger from his belt, pricked his finger with the tip, let 3 drops of blood, dark and thick, fall into a black bowl he'd prepared earlier. Ancient symbols were carved into the bowl's surface, symbols that predated the pacts, that came from the old magic, the dark magic, the kind that demanded prices measured in souls. Time to hedge my bets, Damien whispered. He began to chant, ancient words in a language that hadn't been spoken in 1,000 years. Words that made the air grow cold and the shadows grow long. Words that called to things that should have stayed buried. Because if Kyle wanted to play with blood oaths and ancient rituals, Damien would ensure the game was rigged from the start. He'd spent 15 years planning this coup. 15 years positioning pieces on a board Kyle didn't even know existed. 15 years sacrificing and scheming and waiting for his moment. He wouldn't let a mate bond and a fool's love destroy it now. Not when he was so close. Not when the throne was within reach. Dawn was coming, and with it, the battle for the throne, the prophecy and Sarah's life. Only one side would survive. Damien intended to make absolutely certain it was his, even if he had to burn the kingdom to ash to ensure it. Dawn came to the Frostpeak Citadel like a blade cold, sharp, unforgiving. The great hall had been transformed overnight. The feast tables were gone, replaced by a single circular platform in the center. Ancient runes carved into its surface glowed faintly in the dim light, symbols that predated modern language, that spoke of truth and blood and consequences that couldn't be undone. The hall was packed. Every wolf who could walk had come. Black Ridge warriors lined one wall, hands on weapons. The Frostpeak Council occupied the other. In the balconies above, dozens more watched with hungry eyes. They wanted blood. They would get truth instead. Sarah was brought in through the east entrance, flanked by guards. She walked with her head high, her face blank. She looked isolated in the massive hall. One woman against hundreds. But Kyle, watching from his throne, saw what others didn't. Saw the way her eyes mapped exits, assessed threats. Her warrior instincts operating even now. She was magnificent. And she wouldn't look at him. That hurt more than any blade. Damien stood to Kyle's left face, arranged in solemn grief. But his eyes gleamed with anticipation when he thought no one watched. Marcus Bloodfang Vincent's son, 22 and raw with fresh grief, stood with his warriors, burning for vengeance. Let's begin, Kyle said, his voice empty. Sarah was positioned in the platform's center, small, condemned. Damien stepped forward, playing his role perfectly. The evidence is clear. His voice carried to every corner. A woman with no past, no memory, no loyalty, given unprecedented access to our king. And at the first opportunity she strikes. Alpha Vincent lies dead, poisoned, the method silver leaf and jasmine oil found in her seat. Her signature scent. She had means, motive and opportunity. He gestured theatrically. Sarah is an assassin, a plant sent to destabilize our kingdom and murder our allies. She failed to kill Kyle, so she settled for Vincent. The hall murmured angrily. Marcus stepped forward. I demand justice. Blood for blood. She dies today. No. Kyle's voice cut through the noise like a sword. He stood. The hall fell silent. The law is hard, Kyle said, his gaze sweeping the crowd. The evidence is strong, but strong evidence can be manufactured. Circumstantial proof can be planted. I will not execute a woman on suspicion alone. Marcus snarled. Then what let her walk free while my father lies dead? No. Kyle descended from his throne, each step echoing. I invoke the King's Gambit. The hall erupted in gasps and shouts. The King's Gambit hadn't been used in 2 centuries. It was brutal, ancient, and absolutely final. What is this? Marcus demanded. The Gambit is a truth ritual. Kyle explained, his voice carrying authority. The accuser and the accused are bound by blood oath. Ancient magic judges their words. Any lie extracts a price. Pain, scarring, death in extreme cases. He let that sink in. I will stand as Sarah's alpha. If she lies, I pay the price. If her accuser lies, he pays. Truth will be extracted, and when it's done, we will know with absolute certainty who is guilty. Damien's smile faltered. Just for a second. Cousin, Damien said carefully. Surely a simple trial. An alpha is dead. Kyle interrupted, his eyes narrowing. You said so yourself. His death demands more than a simple trial. It demands truth. Unless... His voice dropped dangerously. You're unwilling to stake your own life on your accusations. The trap was sprung. Damien couldn't refuse without looking weak, without admitting doubt. His jaw clenched. Of course I'm willing. I have nothing to hide. Good. Kyle gestured to Draven. Bring the ritual bowl. Sarah watched with growing horror. Kyle, don't. If I'm guilty, if somehow I did this and don't remember, you could die. He looked at her. Really looked at her. You're innocent, he said simply. I know it, and I'm going to prove it. The ritual bowl was brought ancient bronze carved with moving runes. It was filled with pure spring water. Kyle drew his ceremonial dagger. He sliced his palm, deep blood dripping into the bowl. The water turned red, then began glowing eerie blue. As Alpha King, I activate the ancient compact. Kyle intoned, I stand as Sarah's alpha. Her words are my words. Her truth is my truth. If she lies, I pay. If her accuser lies, he pays. Let the old ones judge. The blue light pulsed, accepting. Kyle turned to Damien. Your turn, cousin. Damien's hand shook slightly as he took the dagger. But he'd prepared for this. His people had planted records showing the apothecary supplied those ingredients to 5 different nobles. Reasonable doubt. He thought he was safe. He sliced his palm, added his blood. The light pulsed brighter, hungry. What Damien didn't know was that Kyle hadn't asked about supply. He would ask about the exact compound, the specific mixture only Damien's apothecary had knowledge to create. The trap was tighter than Damien realized. Let us begin, Kyle said, feeling the magical weight settle over them like chains. Question 1, cousin. Did you see Sarah with your own eyes place the poison pouch in her seat? Damien's jaw clenched. The blue light pulsed, waiting. No, he forced out. Truth. Did you see her approach Vincent's goblet at any point? No. Truth again. Then your clear evidence is circumstantial. Kyle turned to Sarah. Your turn. Did you poison Alpha Vincent? Sarah's voice was steady despite her fear. No, Kyle. I swear I did not. The light pulsed. Stayed blue. Truth. Did you possess silver leaf or jasmine oil other than your natural scent? Never. I wouldn't know where to get those things. Pulse. Blue. Truth. The crowd murmured louder. Kyle's eyes found Damien. My turn. One final question for you, Damien. He stepped closer. The blue light intensified. Why does your personal apothecary stock the exact compound, not just the ingredients, but the specific mixture with the precise ratio of silver leaf to jasmine oil that Dormoon Shadow found in Vincent's blood? The hall went dead silent. Damien's face went white. That's a lie. Standard medicinal. The blue light erupted. Not blue anymore. Violent red. The magic surged like a living thing. It found the lie. Found the liar. Struck. Damien screamed. He clutched his arm as the blood oath magic burned him, searing through flesh. A black mark appeared on his forearm, smoking the symbol of a wolf's head with bared fangs. The mark of perjury. Permanent. Damning. The hall exploded in chaos. Damien staggered backward, cradling his burned arm. His mask of charm shattered completely. You! Rage twisted his features. You were supposed to be a brute all this planning. He lunged, not at Kyle, at Sarah. His hand drew a hidden silver blade, aimed for her throat. If I can't have the throne, none of you will. Time slowed. Kyle shifted, already moving to intercept, but he wasn't fast enough. The blade was 3 inches from Sarah's throat when it happened. The stress, the betrayal, the near death, the blood oath magic resonating in the air, all combined, a perfect storm. The blocks, magical and mental, that had held Sarah's memories and power locked away, shattered like ice hit with a sledgehammer. Sarah's eyes went wide, not with fear, with recognition. Her memories didn't trickle back, they detonated. Parents, laughing, alive. Before the fire, being 5, terrified, alone. Damien appearing, I'll protect you. Growing up, training, becoming a weapon. But something wrong. Damien's cold eyes when she wasn't looking. The prophecy, the mate bond, sensing it at 20. Knowing her destined kink existed. Damien's voice, you'll kill him, or I'll kill you. Her voice, I choose him, even if I never meet him. I choose the bond. Damien's rage, the witch, the spell, the blow, his voice laughing. The prophecy dies tonight. The king will never have you. The cold, the snow, dying. And more, a memory from 20 years ago. A summit, a river, a sad boy crying. You won't always be sad, 7-year-old her had said. Carving a wooden wolf. Someone will find you, I promise. All of it, every stolen piece of herself, returning in a flood. I remember, Sarah whispered. Her voice wasn't hers anymore. Deeper, resonant, a chorus. I remember everything. Her eyes shifted, brown to glacial blue, glowing with dormant power awakening. You didn't just try to kill me, Damien. You murdered my parents. You raised me as a weapon. You tried to make me murder my fated mate. Power erupted from her, white light, blinding, freezing. Damien's blade 3 inches from her throat stopped, frozen solid in mid-air by pure will. Sarah's voice became a roar. You taught me to be a weapon. Thanks for the lesson. The white light exploded outward in a shockwave. Damien was thrown backward, slamming into the wall hard enough to crack stone. His ribs shattered. The entire hall dropped to their knees from the pressure of power radiating from Sarah's ancient primal magic, from bloodlines that predated history. Only Kyle remained standing. The mate bond shielded him. Sarah stood in the platform's center, her small frame radiating enough power to level mountains. My name, she said, voice echoing with otherworldly resonance, is Seraphine Ravencroft, last daughter of the White Wolf bloodline, guardian of the Moon's Chosen. And you, Damien Nightshade, tried to murder me to steal what was never yours. She turned to Kyle, her impossible eyes softening. I remember you too. The summit, 20 years ago, you were 10. By a river, so alone, I gave you something. Kyle's breath caught, the memory surfacing. A wooden wolf, he breathed, pulling the carved figure from his tunic. Seraphine smiled through tears, producing its twin from her clothing. You gave me yours. I gave you mine. I promised I'd find you. Her voice broke human again. Took 20 years and dying, but I kept my promise. The mate bond that frayed silver thread ignited. Not silver. Gold. Blazing. It slammed into place with supernova force. A wave of pure love and recognition filled the hall. Kyle felt her. Every memory, every pain. She felt his loneliness, his weight, his desperate hope. They were two, and they were one, but they weren't done. Damien had recovered, shifting violently into a massive dark red wolf eyes burning with insane rage. If I can't have it, no one will, he howled a signal. A dozen guards throughout the hall, Damien's planted men drew weapons, not attacking the alphas, attacking the council, the witnesses. This was a coup. Kyle shifted instantly, a massive grey-black wolf colliding with Damien. Fangs met fangs, thunder and breaking stone. But Damien's men were charging the unarmed council. Kyle couldn't defend them without exposing his throat. He was trapped. No! Seraphine's voice cut through chaos. The white light wasn't fading. It was growing, solidifying around her. You wanted my wolf tried to steal her. The light began taking shape. She was never yours. Seraphine didn't shift violently. She became like watching dawn take physical form. Light wrapped around her bones, realigned with a celestial cord. Her form expanded. Where a woman stood now stood legend. A dire wolf, larger than Kyle, larger than Damien, larger than any wolf should be. Her fur was pristine, starlight white, glowing from within. Her eyes were the aurora borealis, swirling green, blue, violet. The white wolf of prophecy, not myth, real. She looked at Kale. Her voice resonated in his mind. My king, my mate, I've got the rabble. You handle the traitor. Then she moved. A white blur of impossible speed. Her massive jaws closed around a silver blade before it could fall. The metal shattered. A sweep of her tail sent 3 armored men crashing into walls. She didn't kill. She ended fights. A guardian protecting innocence. A guard lunged with a spear. She dodged her paw, striking his chest with concussive force. He flew backward unconscious. She was everywhere at once, protecting council, saving Black Ridge wolves, disarming traitors with brutal efficiency. Meanwhile, Kyle and Damien's fight intensified, evenly matched in size and strength. But Kyle was furious. This wolf had murdered a child's parents, raised that child as a weapon, tried to force her to kill her fated mate. They circled, snapping, tearing. Damien lunged for Kyle's throat, fast, precise. Kyle ducked under it. Seraphine was there. Her massive form slammed Damien's side, turning his lunge into a stumble. Then, she was gone back to protecting innocence. Damien scrambled, trying to recover, fell directly into Kyle's path. Kyle's jaws closed around Damien's throat, not to tear, to hold. Simultaneously, Seraphine's massive paw, radiating cold and ancient power, slammed down on Damien's hind leg. Crack! The sound echoed through the hall, louder than fighting, louder than chaos. Definitive, final, devastating. Damien's leg shattered completely, bone visible through torn flesh. He howled agony and defeat, his body convulsing back to human form. He collapsed on stone, broken. His coup shattered. His dreams destroyed. Kyle shifted back, standing over his cousin. Not triumphant, just done. Seraphine shifted too, becoming human, small, exhausted. She stumbled and Kyle caught her, wrapping her in his arms. It's over, he said quietly. The hall was silent, every traitor unconscious or disarmed, every innocent protected. Marcus Bloodfang approached slowly, his eyes on Seraphine. The white wolf, he breathed. The prophecy is real. Yes, Kyle said simply. Marcus knelt, not to Kyle, to Seraphine. My father died in a conspiracy to frame you. I was ready to execute an innocent woman. I owe you my honor, my allegiance, my life. The Black Ridge Pack is yours to command. Seraphine placed a gentle hand on his head. You owe me nothing. Your father was murdered by my enemy. That makes us allies, friends, family. She looked at Damien, her eyes hard. He owes everything, and he'll pay. Justice was swift. Damien Nightshade was tried within the hour. His crimes listed murder of Seraphine's parents 25 years prior, kidnapping and magical imprisonment of a child, attempted regicide, murder of Alpha Vincent Bloodfang, conspiracy to commit genocide against the White Wolf bloodline, treason against the Alpha King. The sentence was unanimous: life imprisonment, stripped of all rank, title, property, confined to the deepest silver-lined cell, no visitors, no appeals, no mercy. Co-conspirators were banished, their assets seized and distributed to Vincent's family. It was over. 3 months later, the Frostpeak Citadel had changed. The Guardian Academy occupied the eastern wing. 50 wolves trained under Seraphine's command, learning protection, not just combat, how to defend without becoming monsters. Borders had seen zero attacks. The White Wolf's presence deterred even the boldest rogues. Trade agreements were signed with every major pack. The alliance was stronger than in 50 years. Kael and Seraphine ruled together, not as king and consort, as co-commanders. Tonight they stood on the ridge where he'd found her 3 months and a lifetime ago. The aurora borealis painted the sky in rivers of green and gold. The temperature was -5, practically tropical by Alaska standards. Seraphine leaned against Kyle's chest, his arms wrapped around her, his chin resting on her head. "Hard to believe I was dying right here," she said softly. "I can't believe I almost missed you. If the wind hadn't shifted..." "Stop." She turned in his arms, looking up. "No ifs. We're here, together. That's what matters." He smiled, rare precious, the smile only she received. "I have something for you." He pulled out a small box. Inside were 2 knives, perfectly balanced, custom forged, handles carved from white oak etched with runes. On one, my partner. On the other, my equal. On both, my fate. Seraphine laughed, surprised and delighted. "You're proposing with knives. I know my audience." She took them, testing their weight. "Perfect. Yes," she said simply. 1,000 times, yes. They kissed. Not king and queen. 2 people who'd found each other across death and time and prophecy. When they pulled apart, Seraphine held up the wooden wolf carvings, his and hers, 20 years old, worn smooth. "We were always connected," she said. "Even when we didn't know it, we found each other." "You found me," Kyle corrected. 7-year-old, you made a vow to 10-year-old me, and you kept it. Through death and magic and amnesia, you kept it. Always. They shifted together. 2 wolves, grey-black and pristine white, standing on the ridge where they'd begun. Kyle threw his head back and howled. Not a howl of loss, a howl of joy, of completion. Seraphine joined her voice with his. Their song echoed across mountains, across territories, a promise to every pack. The white wolf had returned. The prophecy was complete. The age of peace had begun. The narrator's voice rose over the final image of 2 wolves silhouetted against dancing lights. AlphaKing Kyle Stormbringer found a woman dying in -10-degree snow. She had 14 combat scars, 0 memories. And when his wolf howled, the name carved in ancient prophecy Seraphine, he knew his world would never be the same. She was not a damsel to rescue. She was a warrior to fight beside. A guardian returned from legend, a mate forged in ice and blood, an unbreakable will. The prophecy spoke of a fated mate. It didn't promise she would be easy. It promised she would be worth it. And in the frozen north, 2 legends proved that the greatest love story is not about rescue. It's about partnership, about standing side by side against darkness, about choosing each other every day even when fate has already chosen. The White Wolf and the Storm King, the guardian and her protector, 2 halves of one legendary whole. When remember, even the coldest ice cannot extinguish a fated bond, and the greatest power lies not in a crown, but in the heart of the one standing beside you. This is their story, their triumph, their beginning. The screen faded to black, the aurora still dancing, the wolves still singing.